Well, here we are, the pit stop right before Dreamland. I've decided to try and make this video a lot more suited for having on in the background, or your second monitor whilst you're playing a game, doing chores, going to sleep, anything like that, so we'll see how it goes. Here's a lore and fact-filled hour of Call of Duty Zombies, because nothing is worse than being alone with your own thoughts. I wanted to start at Black Ops 2. I don't know why, I just think it's one of the most interesting COD Zombies titles. Transit is held as one of the most frustrating maps for a lot of people, and an old favourite for others. With a full lobby of 4 people, it definitely reminds me of why it's a blast from the past, but there was once a glitch in Black Ops 2 that allowed Transit to have 8 players in it. A glitch this good would have made for an excellent feature for a map as big and unique as Transit was. But unfortunately, this was patched by Treyarch, and now this chaotic way to play has gone the way of Blockbuster. The only way you can do this again is by accessing Plutonium, a client that lets you play BO2 safely and easily. Going onto the lobby lets you find 8-player matches. Whilst I'm talking about Transit, it's worth mentioning the insane cut content that was banished from this single map. There was allegedly a day and night cycle that didn't make it into the game, that I would assume changed certain mechanics depending on the time of day, like maybe zombie aggression or some sort of bus schedule. A bus schedule which, by the way, is visible in Transit. Where you spawn inside the bus depot, you can actually see a rotor that clearly specifies that there's a daytime service and a nighttime one. This might have been something the devs left in and didn't change or didn't notice to change, that helped sell the idea of a passing day and night system. There's also Ted's original design, which is uncanny to say the least. This is a skinwalker, and I'm not taking any other answer. I don't think it looks bad by any means, but it looks to be a more stable version of Ted. Not really looking particularly post-apocalyptic like the one we have now, where we can even see his prosthetic skin melting off. Oh yeah, and about that skin, doesn't it make you wonder what the blue-capped bus driver looked like before the world got turned to pieces? Well, there is actually a way you can see it. If you load up a game of Transit and inspect the loading screen with those peepers, you'll see that it's the postcard of what Green Run looked like pre-moon, where the world was still intact. And on a certain billboard outside of the bus station, you can see a smiling bus driver with the same cap and uniform, and even a similar looking face. Is this what Ted looked like? Well, I think so. Considering we can see his robot skin that had melted off like hot cheese off of a grill, it definitely seems like he has some kind of original human look. There are even various screenshots of the interesting development of the pre-alpha builds for Transit that, when looking at them, are reasonably close to what we eventually got, and one that always stands out to me is this screenshot of what looks to be Farm in an alpha phase or some earlier version in general. What you'll first notice is the huge pile of body bags that is some morbid stuff, and leads to so many questions as to why they were there in the first place and how they got there. Sure, they were removed in the final cut, but these devs usually put a lot of thought into the objects and stuff they litter across the environment as a form of visual storytelling. And I'm gonna say something controversial here, something that I've put a lot of thought into given what's in front of us, and say, I think something very bad happened at this farm. I don't know if these bodies were being moved somewhere, or if whoever was responsible for this was trying to get a gunship kill streak. Although the place looks destroyed, this can really open up an interesting mystery as to what the original intent was behind this, because I understand the point of making things try and look creepy and stuff, and adding bodies here and there, but this is like completely off the rails. I mean, what could this possibly be? I've always thought it just looked like more than a simple detail, and more like a statement, something that does have an answer that you can figure out or would have been told to you. You can't just look at this huge pile of bodies and say, this is just for detail. Although the place looks destroyed, there's not visible lava anywhere, flames or smog, and instead, the whole place is just watched over by a gloomy night sky. Once again confirming that Green Run was definitely originally going to have a day-night cycle. Transit was also going to include a bus refueling system, which meant that eventually your Sanctuary on wheels would have ran out of gas and had to have been fueled up State of Decay 2 style, whilst Hellhounds tried to bite your ass. It sounds like a fairly fairly fun feature, to be honest. And this feature getting cut really does explain the sudden lack of one of the most popular and iconic Call of Duty Zombies enemies in the franchise not returning back at the launch of the next installment. Speaking of fun, let me tell you what doesn't sound fun. The Broken World. This is a place that is a hollow shell of Earth as we know it, which is where the maps Transit, Die Rise and Buried take place, where our crew Victis, made up of Morriton Johnson, Misty Brighton, Russman, we don't know his second name or if that is his second name, just call him like Russman Homeless or something, and Samuel Stuhlinger survived the onslaught of the undead whilst trying to play their part in unscrewing the multiverse. Given the aggro the zombies in the series have, I can only imagine how dangerous day-to-day life would be trying to survive in this cruel new era. It's something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about out of fun and lightly morbid curiosity, because I don't really think COD Zombies has ever touched on the concept much, considering they were in pursuit of their main storyline. That isn't to say Treyarch has bad world building, because trust me, they don't. There's a whole Zombies timeline that details at length the wondrous and bizarre ongoings of this and every other universe. We have detailed dates of when key events in this twisting storyline take place, and it even categorizes it into each dimension it all happened in. We've seen the comics explore Victus's nomadic life of constant travel as they set up camp, discuss supplies, dine together and so on, although only few and far between. It would have been superb to see these characters that originally became united during the events of Transit really have to live in this world to add more depth and cover more ground of the post-apocalyptic Earth. I have been glazing the hell out of the concept, but it's just frustrating how much potential there is for something like this. And it has been dabbled in a bit with some radios and the Victus comics and cutscenes, but you've got to remember that this isn't just a new map or one particular location. It's the whole Earth that's gotten transformed into a nightmare that's just as horrifying as skibbity brain rot. Sure, we ate well with the maps we got and the concepts it explored, but it would have been nice to see more of this Broken Earth era and be able to have had a feast. Anyway, before this transpires into a rant of lunacy, let's talk about that world building. In order to achieve world domination, Group 935, the ones that caused all of this, not only wanted to make undead Nazi soldiers, but this German army would wield weapons that came straight from a sci-fi fan's wettest of dreams. Maybe when I mentioned wonder weapons, a couple of them came to mind, but what if I told you there were 75 of these in total? So far, there's always going to be more. Not all of them are what you'd call viable, but there's a lot to pick from, and these will help fight off the Horde most of the time. At the top of all of these, although not the best, sits the ray gun, everyone's favourite wonder weapon. Or at least it was, until we were spoon-fed an arsenal of ridiculously, and more increasingly, powerful whimsical Z-killing contraptions that would get better and better until they would hit what I would say was the apex. Legends tell of nothing coming close to topping this yet, and for good reason. In BO3, the Apothicon Servant was created. Let's ignore the fact that this is a Cthulhu squid that you jam your fist up like a sock puppet, and look more at its power. If you're wondering how this one is objectively the most overpowered weapon of all time in Zombies, then let's scale back a bit and imagine the Gersh device. Yeah, they were the tactical equipment you could get in Ascension back in BO1, and oh, did they pack a punch. Oh, not like pack a punches in Zombies, I mean like the expression. Upon throwing one after a short wind-up, it would explode, creating a black hole and sucking zombies into their demise. What's even more cool about these things is that you get 3 of them to toss about. Now translate those black holes into a questionably slimy squid shooter that comes with 10 of them and has a generously quick reload speed. That is the power of the Apothicon Servant. Unlimited power. It does infinite damage, can rack up lots of kills per second, a good chunk of ammo to hold you over until another max ammo shows up, or you roll an ammo giving gobblegum if used carefully, and to top it off, this isn't even upgraded. Whilst the Apothicon Servant was introduced in Shadows of Evil, there was no upgrade for it. And this was really weird at the time because before that, just about every wonder weapon had a way to pack punch it or upgrade it somehow. What's funny though is there was an upgrade found in the game that let you glitch the weapon and get a fully working upgraded one called Obgwath. Orb Gwoth. I don't know what happened, I sounded like an elite from Halo there. This was seen in a Vanos gaming video, where Vanos and Wildcat, after managing to duplicate their Apothicon servants, did an old glitch where if you swap weapons and interact with the Pack-a-Punch machine around the same time, it would be upgraded. And they managed to pull it off with their wonder weapons, and it worked. It went in the Pack-a-Punch portal, but it got patched weirdly enough and is inaccessible now, and still is to this day. The weapon was brought back, along with a doable upgraded version all the way at the end of BO3 in Revelations, donning the name Estum Oath. Now I sound like I'm trying to cast a spell on you all, which I don't know what that was. To me, they were just mouth sounds. This one not only doubled down on its alien drip with that nice camo from the map, but it had much more ammo, upgrading from the standard 10 total shots to a whopping 15, which now that I type that out may not sound like a great leap forward, but the value you get from each black hole is nutty. This made high rounds and boss fights the easiest they've ever been once you got a hold of this fierce tentacle waggler. What the hell did I just read, and why did I write that? Given the crazy stats we've gone over about this weapon, it seems as though nothing produced by Group 935, Requiem, the Ascension Group, or Division 9 could ever hold a torch up to this squid boy, as the Apothicon Servant isn't just a sum of 115 infused with steel, but it's instead the biology of beings far more powerful than anything humans could do. Sorry, 935. Your heart's gotta go out to the Ascension Group. They aren't talked about as much as Group 935 or Division 9 are, yet these are the guys that were responsible for the wacky wonder weapons we brandish in Ascension, and one is even in Kino de Toten before Ascension came out. The Thundergun, Gersh devices, and Matryoshka dolls. Can you tell this is a Russian group? The team was formed by a former 935 employee that was originally sent out to spy on the Soviet Union and report back to them, but instead ended up actually joining their allegiance. They must have swayed him over by promising him a lifetime of Adidas tracksuits, but that's just my game theory. There were some key members there that have their names tucked away in the storyline and might sound familiar to you, such as Anton Gersh and Dr. Yuri Zavoysky, who joined them much later on in 1955. They were working on teleportation, much like 935, and even created their own Perca-Colas, two of them that are widely beloved by the player base, PhD Flopper and Stamina, as they took inspiration from their works. Supercharged weapons that you would not want to get shot with, chemically engineered beverages, and teleportation, along with any tinkering around with 115. These guys did it all too. The wonder weapons they've crafted, which I've mentioned are the Thundergun and the Gersh devices, even had their own project names. Project Thunder for the Thundergun, and Project Mercury for the Gershes, and there's a blueprint that can be found for the Tundra Gun, a variant of its big brother that instead of shooting a huge gust of wind, it blows an icy load of cryo rounds that freezes the enemies. Fittingly, this is found in Tag de Toten, and that location in Siberia with the lighthouse where Call of the Dead and Tag takes place was a facility dedicated to a Siberian branch of Group 935, and that's where Harveyina ended up going to work. It adds up that this variant of the Thundergun was built up from his knowledge of working at the Ascension Group. As they dipped their toes into the bizarre world of 115 science, Yuri read Ultimus Richtofen's diary, and then started hearing voices of a little girl. It was the voice of Samantha Maxis. She would constantly be chatting in his head, and it started to push him over the edge, and into the pit of insanity. He would start lashing out at his co-workers and muttering to himself like he's just realised that there's never gonna be a Hi-Fi Rush 2. I'm just saying, I don't blame him for losing his mind. That shit took years off my lifespan. Sorry, projecting a bit there. Samantha pushed him to keep working on Project Mercury, and then to trick Gersh into activating one of his famous devices and disposing of him through the black hole it creates, allowing Samantha to travel through it and wreak havoc. And that's where we end up entering Ascension at the beginning of the match, and then have to do the Easter egg boogaloo to resolve stuff. Their base of operations is actually the same one where Weaver loses his eye from the Black Ops 1 campaign mission, Executive Order, but we've also seen multiplayer maps used for molding a zombies experience too. Maybe I'm a sick monster, but if they added an Easter egg into the zombies version where you could find his eye, that would be holy levels of based. Back to the actual facts though, it's not just Ascension that got the campaign multiplayer flip treatment, but this has been a thing that started from the very beginning. The first ever Zombies map and all of its DLC are either a campaign mission area, a multiplayer map, or parts of them mixed together. And being mainly a Zombies player, going back to these places in MP or single player creates a funny feeling, like seeing a childhood home destroyed or changed so much. It's there and it's the same, but it's been changed and tweaked enough that it starts to feel lost to you. Nacht was from the campaign mission Hard Landing and the multiplayer map Airfield. Verrucht is the most obvious one by far, being built upon the map Asylum. Shinonuma is from Knee Deep and Derice is composed of Eviction and Nightfire. The most interesting one though is 5, which was the Pentagon section ripped straight from the campaign with next to no changes made for the majority of this map, and yet it cast an illusion of being entirely different. You'd never notice unless it was told to you, but once you know, it becomes a lot clearer. With the right tweaks and nudges of design and context, these locations somehow become transformative and original. After this, besides a handful of remakes and remasters, and Nuketown, which is Nuketown, the map started being built from the ground up like many parts of BO1, 2, 3 and 4, and you could make a pretty good guess and say it's because of the booming popularity that Zombies had when it started, gaining its fame and for so long after the devs were given much more freedom of creativity and Activision wanted more effort put into this game mode in pursuit of big stonks. The trend started coming back more in Cold War, where several locations were from single-player missions, although once again added to so they're mostly unique, but repurposed and packaged as a new thing. What completely stands apart from such a creative process is Modern Warfare Zombies, which uses not just a portion of a map from its main story or familiar multiplayer mode, but a whole Warzone map that was made with 100 plus players in mind. It's ambitious, I'll give them that, but there is a noticeable lack of fine-tuning for immersion or making sure the space you're in, if reused from anything, is objectively different from the original. And although there are some bits here and there like the spore growth from the Dark Ether, in the base map there's next to nothing immediately noticeable except for a purple tint slapped onto it. Similarly, Cold War's Outbreak had this same thing, and was done before MWZ did, and these once again were just ripped from multiplayer and had no noticeable differences to the environment or structure of the maps, except for changes of the colours and the objectives sat around the place. Comparing these to the older map entries is night and day if we're looking at the visual storytelling. It's certainly not as impactful as the more focused round-based levels. It's not just 935 that were up to their ludicrous tomfoolery, but the other side of the damn world were too. Division 9, which mirrors Group 935 in many ways, is located far to the east in Japan. These guys are the ones to blame for all of Zetsubo no Shima. The creepy facility, the 115 spillage on the island, the annoying way the power needs to be turned on, and not forgetting, the giant spiders. They even made wonder weapons of their own, with their own style, look and effect. Whilst 935 and the Ascension group were screwing around with the Zappy Zap weapons and hairdryers on steroids, the 9th Division were liquidizing 115, leveraging it by turning it into deadly acid that would make short work of whoever walks upon the puddle of death. There are many experiments that Division 9 did on their island, and they continue to haunt and shock players diving into the map again today, which feel somehow much more brutal than what the Germans did over at 935, as we see bodies in water tanks, plants that look like something straight out of Little Shop of Horrors, and mutated zombies that have merged with plants to become hardened, heavily fortified units that even Mother Nature herself would reject. For these guys, it was all about trying to merge biology with botany, and the results were like a Francisco Goya painting. The murky vines and swamps have grown around the deceased victims and scientists from the facility that sits on this tarnished land like it's a beating heart of the cruelty inflicted upon the landscape it sits. Whew, this is starting to get into the horrors of Black Ops 3 Zombies territory. I'd best control myself and move on. To get my point across here, they've had a whole island that has been theirs alone to play God with, and used the test subjects such as Takeo 1.0 as their action figures. Luckily, Takeo was saved by Primus and oh, wait, no he wasn't. He committed ancient Japanese ritual that I can't say on YouTube probably because they'll not be happy with me. Sorry, I know we hate the censorship, it's very annoying. Trust me, me, it annoys me just as much, but he went out with honour. When I word Division 9 like this, it makes them sound like Sid from Toy Story, and I guess that's accurate. The presence of both Group 935 and Division 9 is certainly felt in the Call of Duty Zombies universe, and the similarities they share are apparent, in that they're completely messed up and rotten to the core. Moving away from the scientific sociopaths, let's talk about something that doesn't fully involve science. Magic exists in the COD Zombies universe. A fact that I don't think is particularly shocking, but for some reason hearing magic is in the Call of Duty Zombies universe sounds pretty jarring all things considered. However, what is classed as magic is stuff like the war weapons, power-ups, the mystery box, including the vanishing of it, and all that other stuff. And if you think I sound like I've gone loopy, in the custom games section for Black Ops 2 Zombies, the option to enable or disable it is even called magic. The limits to this power seem almost unlimited, given the ones who wield that power are either godlike beings or humans that wield artifacts from said beings, and the people at the mercy of these entities are us, the players. Paling in comparison, but still changing the course of the multiverse along the way with bullets, brains, and most of all, sheer willpower. From all I've seen and heard from all the content we've had and details shared in these games, there's a hierarchy, if you will, that represents how powerful each of these deities are. To give a summary, there are the plebs at the bottom, they would be us. Then up from that, the zombies. The 115 makes them freakishly strong, and they are somewhat manageable on their own, but they are many, and they will eventually overthrow you. I mean, look what's happened every single time you play a zombies game. Upwards to the Keepers and Apothicons, two beings that are close enough to being the same, except the latter are just corrupted evil ones. They take on Lovecraftian design and look unsettling, with a pale face, lacking facial features, except for a wide mouth, with honed teeth jerking upwards like stalagmite. They hide their true form under a cloak though, so that's about all we can see from them. These things use magic that is clearly beyond our understanding, and were here from the beginning of time, much like the next tier up from these guys, Dr. Monty and the Shadow Man. Two creatures that take on a human-like appearance and, from as far as we can tell, have no origin to trace back to them. Only that they were there since the creation of the universe. Both of these characters have omnipotent powers and can seemingly check in to other dimensions and communicate with anyone they please, alter the command of the Zeds, and even manipulate dimensions like we see the Shadow Man do in the Revelations intro. Safe to say, these guys are just a little bit powerful. There are a lot of theories that are up to interpretation about what exactly these two are. We've seen them both in a squid-like form, but does it go beyond that? Do they have a final form? Are they demons? A corrupted god and Satan? Santa and Krampus? Maybe not those two. That really is up to you to try and think about and come up with a conclusion for. The scale of magic on display can range from something as simple as strange chalk writing appearing out of nowhere to gaining access to fun firearms from a drawing, then hopping to the extremities of merging universes together. Although I do wish the power scaling was a bit more clear, it does a good job of keeping things surprising and it allows new ideas to be implemented into future games. With so much lore about magic and monsters, it wasn't just the story that sunk its teeth into the juicy fruit called ambiguity, but it was what was going on during gameplay, as that's where layers of interesting mechanics reside, and people are left to run wild around these maps. There was a point in gaming where it wasn't a simple task to extract everything from the game files and have easy, full authentication on secrets in entire games unless you were a 90s heist movie tier hacker. Secrets remained as such until they were found or pieced together by eager, epic gamers. A rule of thumb I've come to learn is that for every secret, Easter egg, or hidden feature found, there are about 20 that fall flatter than the Game of Thrones Season 8 because they were rumours, and actually didn't end up being true. Call of Duty Zombies was a huge player in this age. Among the older games like World at War, Black Ops 1 and 2, there are forums upon forums, old videos, and even many IRL conversations that were had, a foreign concept to gamers, I know, that were discussing the many things that could be in these games. And some would involve secret techniques to turn the tides in your favour, like the classic shoot the mystery box hinges, knife it 3 times, teabag the ground so your balls hit the floor, and all those other specific steps that change depending on who told you and how they felt on that day. These went beyond that though, and these would get so specific. The turbine from Transit spawned many myths and rumours, as it was such a strange device for these games. I mean, portable power power in your pocket? Everyone was testing the waters to stretch the limits of what it could do, and such a thing spawned so many fake techniques built up on confirmation bias and ascribed to the logic of, well, it happened once, so it must be true. Like Moralton building better turbines and shields because he's a soy boy nerd, or putting the turbine at the bus makes it move faster, and many more. The amount of rumours it spawned in Black Ops 2 were the equivalent of what the Killing Time Gobblegum did to Black Ops 3. The possibilities felt boundless, and given the way none of these things could be instantly confirmed or denied, the best anyone could do is think about it, try it, and test it. Or tell everyone about it and just straight up lie sometimes, which I admit was always fun to see just because of how ridiculous this game of Chinese whispers would get. Zombies fans in 2012 when they would spread misinformation on the internet. Where do I even start with these? This is easily my favourite portion of this video if you can't tell. I could make a whole video doing a deep dive into many of these, but I could never cover all of them, as that would be impossible. There were, and still are, so many out there. If I had a grain of sand for every Call of Duty Zombies rumour I heard in my life, I swear I would have an island at this point. But we're here now, and I can't help but talk about it, so strap in. Let's start with the most common ones. The Hitler boss. It would be rude not to mention this one. Considering Call of Duty Zombies all started with the Nazis in an alternate timeline, where they experimented with an alien element and created Nazi zombies, I think you can see why this would spark up back when the mode was in its bare bones days, because in Nacht und Toten, people couldn't get to super high rounds. Because we all sucked, and World at War was a genuinely difficult game on a tight map. And it also wasn't exactly the most polished, so that added fuel to the fire. Since game over screens were so early, all anyone could do was try to push that round counter as high up as they could and speculate about what could be waiting on the landmark rounds. The ones that would be in the higher numbers and a real achievement like 40, 50 and so on and so forth. The answer? The Führer, as a giant zombie boss battle. Apparently, anyway, that's just what I've heard. 50 was the one I always was told, as it's a round that realistically no one was getting to anytime soon, so no one could necessarily disprove it anytime soon. What made this one even crazier is that on nearly all of the maps in this game, this rumour not only carried over, but somehow people still believed it. Apparently, he was on Nacht, then could also be found on Verrückt under the same or similar conditions. It seemingly skipped Shinonuma, a bit of a weird jump, but I'm guessing it was because of the Japanese focus ties, or at least if it did, I never caught wind of those ones. And then apparently, he could be found under Reese too. Zombie Hitler really got around. I remember great times with friends way back when, playing World at War on Nacht specifically. I'm wondering if the Hitler boss really was real. Only rarely, but the thought crossed my mind. I mean, it was so talked about amongst anyone who had their hands lying on a copy of the game, it made you wonder that maybe it is a thing. In fact, I even heard someone got to round 50 and managed to kill the Hitler boss and got dual-wield ray guns as a reward. Don't shoot the messenger. I'm just saying. Another one that you may or may not have heard was a witch, the one who controlled the zombies and cackled at you during the beginning and end of each match of Nacht. Another dated one, which is why this was a Nacht thing. It was said that this evil witch controlling the undead could be found and killed, crowning you as the Apex champion and stopping all of the zombies in their tracks. Where was this witch hiding in such a small map? Well, it was supposedly within that ominous barrier made up of rocks that forms into a tunnel at the mystery box room. She would be lurking there, and you had to try and kill her before it's too late. And wouldn't you know it, nothing ever came true about this. Although I've got to respect this one, because I suppose you could say this description applies to Samantha in some way, and these rumours actually were on the mark about the story that came to be, as she does control the zombies, and if she was to be killed, the zombies would stop. I think there could be a small chance that Treyarch could have heard about this rumour during the early days, combined with what we know to be true about players saying they heard the zombies saying Sam occasionally, which is how they started Samantha, and may have used the idea of her controlling the zombies as a basis for Samantha's powers and tendencies to cackle and giggle like she does. Once again, it's a small chance, but this doesn't sound impossible by any stretch given what we know about Treyarch taking fan theories or rumours and adapting them into the storyline. In the same vein, it's been duly noted that many rumours from these games have come not just from what can be observed with our eyes around certain areas or sourced from the imagination, but there are a ton of odd noises that can make an eyebrow or two raise. Take some time to lend an ear to the immaculate sound design of Treyarch's audio team, and you'll notice a cargo crate's worth of odd noises that'll make you do a double take, then throw your headset off your head and grab the nearest tinfoil hat you have, although I have no idea who has one of those just laying around. On World at War Shi no Numa, there are 2 instances of some real creepy and intriguing shit that you can come across, both of which aren't particularly easy to come by, as you'd have to be in the right place at the right time or hunting for them. The first is a phone call, one made by you, apparently, yet you'll be surprised by what you hear. "I know when you're sleeping," the phone tells you, spoken as if it sees right through you, mocking you. Joke's on that thing though, I don't need a phone call from a demon to mock me, I can do it just fine by myself. So, unlucky. The identity of the culprit is unknown, and it doesn't seem to be Samantha. This did spark discussion amongst people that pondered about what it could be, or what the line means on a scale of significance. Something of note though is that the line "I know when you're sleeping" is a phrase taken straight out of the Easter egg song hidden on the map that came before it on Verrucht called Lullaby of a Dead Man, sang by the ever-talented Elena Sigmund. So this to me is clearly not only an odd Easter egg made to catch someone off guard, but also a nod to the song that came before this. I'm gonna touch upon Treyarch's godly sound design soon, don't worry. Next, the whispering. When trudging through the thick, murky mud and waters of the Swamp of Despair, unfortunately you're not going to hear an 11-foot ogre going about his day in his habitat, but you will hear some alarming whispers that will dance past your ears and unveil a more eldritch element that showed many players at the time that zombies wasn't messing around, and it will go out of its way to throw in some spooks that are more subtle but just as impactful. The actual sound used here is really good. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's terrifying, but good. What are these whispers? I don't hear you asking because I'm sat talking to a microphone on my own right now. It's not known, although I think that's okay. It's good to leave some things up to the imagination. Maybe it's the 115 near you turning your brain to shriveled up socks, causing auditory hallucinations, or maybe you could chalk this down to them being the lost souls of the swamp, the many zombies and humans that have died here. Given that we've been talking about mostly immortal beings that have powers ready to change the fate of the universe and fuck you up real good, I don't think some ghastly wandering souls is a step too far over the line. As much as I would love to go on about the crazy number of urban legends, myths and rumours that are everywhere in this series, we should move on before I talk you to sleep. Oh wait, isn't that the point? About the sound design I mentioned. I'm about to be speaking fluent Japanese. You could say that the soundtrack to Zombies is easily one of its strongest assets, not only having a completely new song to pop and lock to with each map, but their sheer attention for all of the incredible and interesting trivia surrounding it. Like I mentioned, in every map they would have a new song made specifically for it, and not only do they give me an eargasm, but they also contain so much juicy storyline detail that usually wouldn't be conveyed very easily in the gameplay. The example that rushed straight to my head was the Shi no Numa song The One, that really hits a guy right in the feels with its heavy but surprisingly mellow rocking riffs that complement Elena's vocals so well. The lyrics she sings may go over your head the first few listens, as you'll most likely be adding your own notes via bullets and percussion by hammering those ammo mags into your gun. When you're focusing on the words sung though, it becomes clear that this is actually from the perspective of a zombie. It goes on to detail that they have lost their humanity but gained apathy, accompanied by a taste for the human biology that's taken over their old senses, as they wait for the one to come and kill them, setting them free from being such a monster. That was pretty deep, not gonna lie, but it's that kind of perspective, writing, and additional effort put into this third mode that makes its world, characters, and messages so impactful. They didn't need to tell us what it's like for a zombie in this world, and it's even easy to forget now sometimes until this song whacks you in the face, that the zombies were nothing more than the cannon fodder that made strange noises. This was later touched on in Black Ops 2 and Die Rise, and the zombie groans I've mentioned twice already, once on the Icebergs series and the other time on the Horrors of Black Ops 2 video. Check them out if you want, they're in an iCard here or the description, so I'm not going to repeat it, but to say World at War was this mode in its infancy, not even 3 maps in and only just developing a story with characters, we're going to need a new reader because the levels of nuance is off the chart. One more example of why their sound is so good is actually all the way to Cold War Zombies, with the release of Firebase Z. Not my most beloved map, if anything on Cold War it's D Machine, my beloved, Come Closer, but the song on Firebase is one of the most controversial ones we've had. It doesn't follow the heavy metal rock that players have gotten so accustomed to, but for me, I think the change of pace works for what the song is about. Maybe I'm just a sad, sensitive boy, but there are so many emotions conveyed here, and this was probably the best way they could have done it. It's about Samantha being trapped in the dark ether and the clutches it has on her now. How at this point, it is deep rooted within her and she feels as though she's losing herself. The icing on top of this depression flavoured cake is that this was sung by Julie Nathanson herself, the voice actor for the character. The lyrics, "I am lost, but I don't want you to find me, I will find my own way," I think grapples with her from the old storyline, and that although she's gotten even stronger now, mentally she's on a road to nowhere, and only she can pull herself out of it and strive towards her purpose or destination of closure and clarity for all she went through. To have it mean something. To have good damage, as my fellow BoJack Horseman enjoys would say. The song is not for everyone. I'd even argue it's an acquired taste, but the emotion and meaning behind this one spells out so much for the character in question, and how they're responding to what has and is going on around them. Moving away from the actual songs and going to the nitty-gritty sounds. The team responsible for this do know how to put on a good display for the ears, making these maps feel as alive, or dead, as they're needed to. Looking over to the Broken Earth, it's so still, like the dust settling after a tornado, but it gives you just enough to let your imagination run wild. I bring up Transit again because this has to be the best example of this, just next to Nacht. If you go over to Farm, you'll hear the wolves howling. If these aren't giant hellhounds, they've got to be some of the only wildlife that has survived these blasts. Then the actual bus you ride on, or don't if you love to assault the driver, even has great sounds. Hearing the steady engine hum, acting as a blanket to your ears from the sounds of the hell going on outside of this metal box. You can hear Ted moving around with his strange booping noises, and then his metal limbs begin to steer the bus. Then I should probably mention Verrückt because it is insanely layered when it comes to audio. To start, the power room feels chaotic with not only the flashing lights, but the constant surges of electricity that you can hear. They buzz around the room and combined with the screams of the victims' ghosts and the drills, creates an atmosphere that you can't run from, as you are always left to imagine the pain and anguish that transpired here, and it all feels like it's permeating around this facility. Point is, Treyarch does not mess around when it comes to their audio. And hey, who knows, maybe the next time you're playing zombies now, after listening to this, you might pick up on some auditory details you never noticed. What's crazy to me is that there are other things going on out there, and I'm not just talking about the universe that Ultimus and Victus are in, I'm talking way more out there, and so many more people struggling in this mess, just like them. Take Alcatraz Prison and Morgue City for example. These two places are connected in a separate dimension, although from everything I've read and heard and seen about these two, it seems like they are in a separate pocket dimension, but within the same overall dimension, if that makes any sense. I don't know quantum physics, nor have I fully grasped Jujutsu Kaisen's dimension powers, I'm just a goofy goober on the internet, but that's the explanation that I think makes the most sense anyway. We have 4 prisoners in one, and 4 dubious inhabitants of the city in the other. What they have in common is that they're all sinners. They have all committed morally wrong acts that have been judged by one of those higher powers I talked about earlier, the Shadow Man, the Arbiter of Doom. He's trapped the Morgue City crew in their place of misdeeds, and managed to give the warden over at Alcatraz powers to keep the prisoners trapped there on the island and are having to repent for their sins. The difference here is that the warden wants to keep the Mob of the Dead crew there to toy with them and watch them suffer, and the Shadow Man over at Shadows of Evil is tricking them into doing his bidding under the guise of the 4 being able to atone for the things they've done, by doing him a small favour and giving him access to the summoning key and collecting souls to destroy the universe. For lots of fiction, that's the entire plot, intro, climax, conclusion, the full shebang, all of it. For Call of Duty Zombies, it's Tuesday. The fate of the Shadows of Evil crew seems to be that they have died helplessly trapped in Morgue City during its downfall, used and left to the mercy of the undead. As for the prisoners over at the Rock, it ended surprisingly optimistically. Outside of the purgatory pocket dimension of hell, in the real world, they all died. After the potentially thousands of attempts done, the group consisting of Sal DeLuca, Finn O'Leary, Billy Hanson, and Albert Arlington managed to break out of the cycle they were stuck in, and their souls were put to rest. Then, over in another universe, we have a completely different change of pace. Still full of zombies of course, but under completely new circumstances. We follow the Chaos Crew, consisting of Scarlet Rhodes, Stanton Shaw, Bruno Delacroix, I cannot say that name, Bruno Delacroix, and Diego Nicali. Keep in mind, this was Treyarch's answer to making a new story, that strayed away from the loaded Ether timeline, and was a completely new one with the same formula when it came to zombies, but starting from scratch. A blank canvas with ideas that Treyarch had been wanting to do. The goal of this group is to find out more about a mysterious cult called The Order that seems responsible for turning people into zombies. And on top of that, they kidnapped Scarlet's father, Alistair Rhodes. So, daddy issues incoming. Alistair was a man that was clearly caught up in the affairs of circumstances that go beyond humanly shenanigans. In order to find our lost father and learn more about the ever-growing threat that is the Order, with their power spreading as quickly as ink spilling over paper, they have to trudge through tales of old legends and venture through mythological planes to even have a chance at reaching some inkling of insight. As to what that could be would soon be discovered. Is what I would have said if the story wasn't dropped in BO4 because of development issues, but that's a different story that I've already mentioned in one of the Icebergs. The extent of Alistair Rhodes' knowledge, the mythology that is actually real in this world, and the fate of the characters is unknown. Not out of artistic ambiguity, but these pieces of the story never came to be. What set this one apart was that it stood up on its own 2 feet, and it said, we don't need to be connected to the rest of the Ether story, let's go crazy with new ideas. And then, the funniest thing happened. In a random radio in Vanguard Zombies, of all games, there was a name drop on Shino Numa Reborn of Alistair Rhodes and Sentinel artifacts, which does have some merit to it given we see an artifact that looks suspiciously close to one that the Order wield during all of Black Ops 4.
Craft to Special Forces. I have an update about that page from the Tome of Rituals that you fought so hard to obtain. Bellica and I have completed our study of its contents, and it appears we struck gold, as the Americans are fond of saying. The page recounts how a group of priests and officials in Okinawa Prefecture banded together to save their lord from what they considered demonic possession. In fact, this man had bonded with Syraxis, much the same way that you are currently bonded to your ethereal allies. They arranged a visit to the swampy island where you now find yourselves, and ambushed him with a special relic, while the page gives specific instructions on the use of that relic to sever the bond between a dark ether entity and its human host. It gives no description of the relic itself. It reminds me of when I studied the writings of Alistair Rhodes, an amateur demonologist and personal hero of mine. Rhodes wrote about different objects of power that he called sentinel artifacts, but I was never able to find out exactly what they were. Nevertheless, if we can find the relic we seek at Shino Numa, I am quite certain I can use it on Von List and trap Cortifex in that little scepter of his.
I don't think I need to explain Alistair Rhodes' sudden name drop, that's a huge thing. So this is confirmation that they are connected. Some would say this is great and that it's exactly the thing it needed to have more of a concrete conclusion, and others would say that by having this connected to the Ether story, it adds a lot of baggage and unanswered questions, and takes away from what made the Chaos story so unique, that being it wasn't held back by it needing to be shoulder to shoulder with the Ether Boogaloo, and having every writing decision need to be traced back directly to it for any of it to make any sense. It was like being able to have chocolate flavoured ice cream without needing to have some room for a big scoop of vanilla afterwards. And don't get me wrong, I believe in vanilla supremacy, but the variety and being able to taste the untainted flavour was delicious. But now, we have to have them on the same plate. And to stretch this ice cream analogy out for the last time, the chocolate ice cream has stopped being made. If you're lactose intolerant, I'm sorry to ambush you like that, but but I think I've made my point clear. We only have pieces left of what could have been a flourishing story if it got picked up properly, and the hope for most people, I'd say, is that maybe it will, and if it does, I pray that it's going to be coherent and not full of contrived amendments and plot holes. Yeah, the Chaos story and universe is the same as, and now connected to, the Ether story, which is why I can mention them alongside the rest of the other groups and dimensions. I'm curious about your thoughts on this one, and I think the discussion would be really interesting, so spill your takes on this in the comments. That mythological approach to this mode has solidified itself in the genre, and although we have seen mythology before, it was only ever really used as a springboard for other ideas, or referenced back to, such as the mob of the dead plane being named Icarus, or the pointers that imply the universe operates similar to old Norse branches of reality, or even the fact that the Nazis in Group 935 were looking for ancient races and hidden worlds such as Agartha, which is derived from the conspiracy theory that the real Nazis were actually trying to look for that place, but they'd have a better chance at finding Narnia. It's been mentioned and referenced, but never truly embraced like it was in the Chaos storyline, and you could tell that Treyarch had been wanting to do it for a long time with the care they put into having each map feel so grandiose. The ones we saw containing such mythology were 9 and Ancient Evil, which are also widely considered as two of the best zombies maps to date, and although Dead of the Night and Voyage do contain this stuff too, I don't think it's anywhere near on the same level, on the WoW scale, as the former pair. In 9, we see lots of Egyptian themed mythology, in a noteworthy giant colosseum, and a temple that looks like something straight out of Tomb Raider. We're not only shown through the Ra perk shrine, which is in every Chaos map, but so are the other shrines respective to their own culture of belief. There's a section that keeps with the Egypt theme specifically where our Ra perk is placed. It has the murals that are packed with the many tales that went around back then, plastered upon the walls, coated in rich oranges and golds, along with the vast wealth the royalty so tied to those beliefs possessed. The next area showcasing mythology is the Danu room, a sharp contrast to the opulent, wealth-filled tomb of Egypt. This one is lush, coated in the warmth of the outdoors, of nature, as a titan of a tree is stemmed up, and around you is all built upon old stone bricks. Given the nature of what I just described, you could make a decent guess that she was the goddess of nature and fertility, and that's correct, she's part of Celtic mythos. Then there's the heavenly room of Zeus, a well-known lad from Greek mythology, more specifically the god of lightning, and this room is probably my favourite one because of how clean and polished the architecture looks, topped off with the classic Greek pillars and perfectly placed tiles that have stood up the finest against the opponent that is age. Just being there is as though you've reached Olympus itself and feels perfectly in line with what Greek mythology and culture is. Then lastly, Odin, straight out of Norse mythology, aka this is the Viking room. It's full of solid, sturdy wood and unlike the others, takes on a more rustic approach. In the centre of the room sits a Viking rowboat on full display, looking as cool as they always have. And remember, all of these rooms are for the purpose of each perk statue, and I'm not gonna lie, Treyarch just straight up cooked here. They went so hard on doing this and it paid off really well. They look great. The map Ancient Evil goes on to show more mythology with the whole place being set in the real life place Delphi, a beautiful centerpiece of the world as the Greeks thought it as, in which Zeus sent 2 eagles to soar across the world in search for the center, and Delphi is where they ended up. But in Ancient Evil we see it buried underground, where only remnants of light shine through, now a lost utopia under a shadow. As it turns out, this Delphi was actually the real one, and the one we know IRL is supposed to be a decoy to keep the real one underground safe. What's funny is, cut content reveals that we may not have gotten to take this trip to Delphi, but instead Morocco, with the file name for the map allegedly being ZM_Morocco. How very subtle. This next part is me spitballing, but I think we could have visited somewhere like the Atlas Mountains, which holds its own folklore about a young couple in love, but they were from opposing factions. But upon realising their attempts to be together wouldn't happen, they cried and cried and their tears formed too late heartaches at the mountain. And the rest basically played out like Romeo and Juliet. They cast themselves into the water so that they didn't have to live with the pain of heartache and not being together. Yeah, that's pretty sad stuff, but it's sad stuff I could see Treyarch pulling and giving it some kind of twist to the story or location. As all cut content goes, we'll never actually know what a ZM_Morocco was really going to be. Back to the map we did get instead, it was injected with a big dose of mythology here, with old familiar figures springing to life, operating just as dark as the shadows they've been banished under. We see Geganese, which are those giant 6-armed tanks that spam spears at you, which once again ripped straight from Greek mythology here, and just made even more terrifying somehow. And there's even the mythical Pegasus, which I never thought we'd see frickin' Pegasus in this horde shooter, but he's there. And the cherry on top, Medusa is the twist villain. I use the term twist loosely because, you know, we could have seen it coming from a mile away, but twist villain all the same. It was her that turned everything to absolute poopy during the map's conclusion. Essentially, just being here in these maps perfectly conveys the feeling that you are in these surreal, grand places that shouldn't be accessible or explored with our mortal vessels. It's like the devs ripped off the bandage and said, if you want mythology, here, and drowned us in it in the space of just a handful of maps. This is where the next piece of cut content comes in. The map after Ancient Evil, which is where the Chaos story got cancelled, has been found in the game files, albeit only accompanied by a vague file name, ZM_Blue. Given what we know about the nature of the Chaos story too, it's a saucy bet to assume this was Atlantis. The description for this on the COD Zombies wiki even goes on to say that there was supposed to be an Earth throne room waterfall area, and although that's not concrete evidence, that just has Atlantis vibes. And if I am on the mark, if that was Atlantis, then it looks like the Lost City is gonna remain that way. I've really sat here and sang the praises of this game mode, and for good reason of course, but I've been talking about Treyarch Studios' version of Zombies, the OG. Due to the success and creative freedom working on this granted compared to the rest of Call of Duty, other COD developers tried their hands at making it, and some of them are underrated, and some make sitting in a sensory depraved room seem invigorating. I'm gonna start with Advanced Warfare's Exo Zombies, made by Sledgehammer. This one had pretty mixed responses from the player base all around, and although it felt fun, the constant changing of the fundamentals of zombies and the chaotic maps and the spam of just as chaotic enemy types didn't make for much fun. And it was this game in particular that introduced enemies that shoot back at you in zombies, which feels just as bad as it sounds. And to put it on a weirdly obscure scale, there's like one end of it which is fighting Godric the Grafted, you know, great time, and then there's the other end of it which is terrible, like fighting Melania. Yeah, we're about there for how frustrating it is. And the trend of enemies that shoot back in zombies that got implemented here seems to have just stuck, and I have no idea why, despite nobody on the entire planet, in fact in the entire Milky Way, enjoying this. Please stop adding this in. We have World War II zombies that is probably the worst one for me personally. The horror and atmosphere is near perfect. Like, you know, it's some good stuff. I know what they were going for. I've got to give them that, but the gameplay was the Achilles heel for this one. Very clunky and strange feeling, especially when it came to the story, and it made for an underwhelming experience. Guns were like little pea shooters even when pack-punched. Just nothing worked. And then finally, the one that had to be the biggest redemption arc ever. Infinite Warfare Zombies. This has to be hands down the best non-Treyarch Zombies mode we've had to date. This one has bolstered fondness as the years have gone on. Once again, this had some interesting maps and gameplay choices, and by that I mean absolute tragedies that are found in the later half of the DLC season. I would cry less at a funeral than I would playing Beast from Beyond. But however, the first two maps, Zombies in Spaceland and Raven the Redwoods, maybe I can open up room in my heart for Shaolin Shuffle, but specifically the former two are such great, unique experiences. Even the plot for this game is the polar opposite of the Ether story in concept, tone, and execution. 4 actors go to audition to work under a bizarre director named Willard Wyler. Yet this guy acts really weird like an incel, and as they seem to go to what I thought was a demo screening, they get sucked into the movie by Willie pulling off some creepy occult pagan ritual. Objective: survive. The films they were cast in were wacky and zany, fully embracing each map's time period and the type of media birthed from its culture, and all of them were supposed to be these cheesy horror films. Zombies on roller skates in an 80s space-themed park where the David Hasselhoff man himself is a DJ. Yeah, who needs money anyway? They can just have it. When the game mode wrapped, it was left at a cliffhanger after the super easter egg players must do to get the real ending, where you'd be tasked with beating the Mephistopheles, or I should call him Metastopheles, because they straight up made him look very close to how Lee Ross looks, the guy that directed Infinite Warfare Zombies. Bravo, Lee Ross & Co. Bravo. Anyway, the imagery is once again full of flames and Satan-y stuff, and the cliffhanger after the fight is that this goes beyond a couple of movies, as they're now suited and booted in Will Oddweiler's Purple Drip. This happened after they put him into Zombies in Spaceland, the very map where they started. It's almost like some kind of prophecy that got fulfilled, and it seems to be that this is some kind of supernatural reality dimension, and there are many more like it. Sorry, I said this was more simple at the start of this, didn't I? On an ending like that, yeah, I think it's safe to say that Lee Ross and his team had more story to tell, and they really did. A sequel was planned, and Lee had mentioned that he wanted to have the next one set in hell. I'm not sure if that's just for one map maybe, or the whole theme of IW Zombies 2, but that is a goated idea and I am all here for it. He also said that he wanted to have all this connect to the Ether story, and that all of those maps from Treyarch would have been other films that Will Oddweiler made. Not gonna lie, this one is kind of a miss for me. I get the idea and why that would be fun, but from what we can tell, it sounds like that would have become canon, which would have done catastrophic damage to the Ether story and shattered the stakes of everything our Primus, Victus and Ultimus did at that point. And if he wasn't a Backstreet Boy and didn't want it that way, then I guarantee Activision would have, just for the sake of selling quirky Fortnite skins. Sorry, I meant operators, slip of the tongue. And it makes even more sense looking at what happened with the campaigns of Treyarch and Infinity Ward being made canon to Zombies for the sake of pushing operators on the store. If this wasn't supposed to be canon, then I would have been open to it as a fun Elseworld what if, but I still don't think it would have worked from a storytelling perspective. At the end, much like the Chaos story, it felt like IW Zombies had really grown legs and began to walk. And as exciting as it would have been seeing Treyarch's crazy cast coming back in such a new style and reacting to this wild stuff, I do think it would have severely pushed aside the story of the main cast and plot at play. However you feel about this mode, whether it's a bloomer, happy, positive outlook about it, or you're waiting to assault the next person that asks you about it, having a conclusion might have been interesting. I'd even settle for Lee Ross just coming out and telling us what was going to happen, as they did craft some amazing concepts and executed them to a good standard for the most part that did end up being the silly and fun breath of fresh air we could have had round 2 with, and I think the story and gameplay was clearly in good, passionate hands. From the facts and lore we've covered about zombies so far, maybe you've noticed something. Each iteration of the mode we've covered has set its own distinct theme, something that you could pick out and instantly pick up on its presentation and style. This has caused a divide over whoever you ask about which one is the best direction for zombies to follow. I'm sure there's one you prefer, and there is for me too. However, wouldn't it be nice to have seen where all of these could have gone? Having a healthy dose of all of them? I've seen many comments on some of my other videos that, by the way, you should do yourself a favor and watch them, where people express how they enjoy the sci-fi occult aspect that was the prominent focus in the older games. There are also those who prefer the deep, Lovecraftian, existential, cosmic storytelling, or the mythology-themed stuff we saw in the later Black Ops games. And then the camp that thinks zombies should stay as silly and mostly light-hearted as Infinite Warfare Zombies was. All of them are super interesting in their own right, and I want to guzzle all the sauce they have to give, but to me, what they all have in common that draws most of us to this mode over campaign and multiplayer and Warzone is that Zombies has always been, unapologetically, its own thing and walked its own path. It wasn't the usual COD formula slop that we see now, and stood so tall that there was allegedly a cancelled Zombies standalone game in development circa 2011-2012. It still gets demanded to this day. Go look on Twitter if you're brave enough. And there are always rumours going around that it's going to come out and that it's in development, but they just can't get to it yet, and all that waffle. And there will be many more rumours like that to come. Zombies fans are the most passionate for a reason. You don't see many other areas of COD that listen to a whole hour-long video about interesting lore and facts about this mode, or even take the time to make said videos. The developers had the most creative control, told the most interesting stories, and had some of the most innovative and funnest gameplay in the franchise's history. Call of Duty Zombies is the furthest thing from Call of Duty, and that's the quirk that made it so beloved by everyone. Chronicles wasn't just the best-selling DLC in PlayStation's history for a long time for no reason. I mean, it literally started by accident, as I'm sure you might know by now, very well-known fact. If not, basically what happened was the dev teams whilst working on World at War's campaign saw the burning animations for the cooking soldiers and thought, they kinda look like zombies. And this sparked a fun side project, fueled by passion and kindled by spirit. Nocturne Totem was hiddenly put away at the end of the World at War campaign for the unsuspecting 8-year-old to find. The mode took off so hard that Verrucht came out, solidifying the zombies formula, and the rest you already know, and continues to this day. To fight against the COD formula that's getting a lot of people mad at the franchise and burnt out, and most of them are flourishing. That's its secret. That is one of the most interesting facts about Call of Duty Zombies there is. It's so different from COD as a whole, it feels like an entirely different game series, and that's in a genuinely positive way. It was rebellious in all the right ways to the usual norm that has gotten players so jaded lately, and I hope it keeps swinging. There were definitely misses, but when it comes to the test of time and overall merit, it's the sheer creativity to construct amazing, unique experiences that keeps us coming back to games like this. All of that has made this very video possible in the first place. Well, there you have it. That was an hour of Call of Duty Zombies facts and lore to sleep or relax to, or just, probably have on your second monitor. I'm sure that's what like 90% of you were doing. Point is, I'm really glad you've made it this far. I can never quite tell you how much I appreciate that in these videos. You could probably go back to all of my other outros, and I'm sure I sound like a broken record. I'm guessing I've said that as well, haven't I? This has been more experimental content for me to do, because, and you might have noticed, there's been a lot less editing in this. There's been like less sound effects and like goofy memes and stuff like that, and I wanted to get something I'm happy with out for you guys, and I think a change of pace in the format for the channel isn't a bad thing every once in a while. I've actually had quite a few people say that they fall asleep to my videos or listen to them whilst they're at work or doing whatever, and this video is to address that specific thing. Furthermore, with less sound effects and less visual stuff going on too, it's saving me time, and that time can go towards the bigger projects like the Horizon videos, the Icebergs, and whatever super secret other things I might have planned. Considering I do all of this stuff on my own, the writing, recording, editing, thumbnails, and everything in between, having this content outlet where I can scale back on the insane amount of editing and the length of them too, and put a lot more of that focus into the big ones. So not only do we get a fresh format for videos, just a different variation of content, but also it saves time and I get to put more focus and attention and energy into the bigger projects I have. I hope this one was something you did enjoy. I hope it was an easy listen or a relaxing watch or anything like that, because that's really what I was going for. And if the video gets good reception and there's a lot of positive feedback, then I'd definitely consider doing another one of these, maybe even making it a series on the channel. There was probably some stuff you did know on there, some stuff you didn't, some stuff you might have actually already knew from the Icebergs and then watched this, and if that's the case, then you're a real one for watching all the other stuff. Not that it hasn't been like this for the whole video, but I'm sensing more waffle going on right now than in a Belgian bakery, so I'm gonna leave this video here. If you enjoyed, be sure to smash the like button. If you have any facts you want to add and share or discuss more upon, then comment it down below. I'm always up for the discussion. Subscribe to the channel if you aren't already, you won't regret it, and turn on the notification bell too to stay notified whenever I upload a video. Consider becoming an exceptional channel member too. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time.